Sinister Comet 3I/Atlas turns green, revealing unexplained secrets as it approaches haunted Mars. The night sky glowed an unsettling green, casting eerie shadows across the sleepy suburb of Maplewood. Sarah Thompson shivered beneath her thin blanket, clutching it against her chest as whispers from her neighbors crept through the thin walls of their house. The comet, they said, was coming. And with a doom. Pets had already started vanishing. Mia and Jake, her innocent loves, were tucked in their beds, blissfully unaware of the dread that thickened in the air like a fog refusing to lift. The news reports churned with half-truths, painting a grotesque picture of the town. Lights in the sky. A frantic journalist shouted, yet there was only fear etched on the faces of those watching. Strange shadows creeping through the trees. What had once felt like a quaint community now felt like a prison. Something was wrong, and every late-night nursing shift made Sarah's nerves fray at the edges. It started with a flicker, just a small light at the edge of her vision, one that danced like a wisp of smoke. It was hard not to notice how Mr. Henderson stood by his porch, his trusty dog trailing behind him, peering into the dark with an unsettling intensity. He had always been helpful, a sweet old man with a kind heart. But now she felt prickles of unease every time he passed. "Come on! It's just exhaustion," she whispered to herself, urging her pounding heart to slow as she prepped for a long night shift. But when she returned home, the atmosphere was strangely charged. Jake's laughter echoed from the backyard. Sarah almost laughed with him until the chill of realization crept in. He was outside, and there was someone or something talking to him. Heart racing, she rushed for the door, each heartbeat drumming in her ears. "Jake! Come inside!" Her voice sliced through the night. As he scampered to the door, she turned, catching a glimpse of a figure disappearing past the corner of their yard. Who was it? Thoughts darted wildly through her mind. She felt as if she was teetering on the edge of something ominous, like standing before a gaping abyss. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days blurred together, tension rippling through the neighborhood like a current. Pets vanished one by one, and neighbors began to exchange furtive glances. Mr. Henderson still walked his dog daily, but the way he stared at her children felt predatory, as if he could smell fear. The flickering lights above reached a fever pitch, twisting her safe world into something darkly distorted. Desperation clawed at her, she needed answers. Digging into Maplewood's history, Sarah stumbled across dark folklore tales of rituals that appeased celestial forces. She couldn't shake the dread that gripped her throat. It had to be about the comet. Maybe Mr. Henderson was part of something sinister, perhaps even an actor in this living nightmare. The comet's glow burst through the night as it reached its zenith, a malevolent lantern in the sky. Shadows writhed and pulsed, creating a symphony of chaos in the cold air. Sarah's skin prickled, and she could almost feel a heartbeat from the earth beneath. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, propelling her outside, where she met the wide, soulless eyes of Mr. Henderson. "Enough is enough," she said, voice trembling but firm. He stepped closer, smirking, utterly unfazed. "You shouldn't have delved too deep, Sarah. Some secrets are better left in the dark." As he loomed over her, the comet's light exploded with brilliance, casting all of Maplewood in a scene of horrified revelation. Trust melted like ice in a furnace, and reality blurred into horror. What had she woken up to? And would she be able to protect Mia and Jake from the shadows closing in? Fear gripped Sarah as she stood before Mr. Henderson, the sharp contours of his face twisting in an unsettling grin. The comet burned bright overhead, an unholy glow casting grotesque shadows that swarmed around them. It felt as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. "What do you mean by secrets?" she whispered, a chill crawling down her spine, making her shiver despite the warm summer air. He stepped even closer, and the odor of damp earth wafted from him, mingling with something sweetly rotten. Your children are precious, aren't they? But they are connected to what lies within the light of the comet. A sickening knot twisted in her stomach. It made no sense, yet she felt an instinctive truth in his words. The way he looked down the street, it was as if he could see beyond the asphalt, into the very pulse of the town. What were those whispers that curled in the corners of her mind? The grumbled stories of ancient sacrifices? The sudden vanishing of pets? She took a step back, heart hammering. What are you talking about? You have to leave my kids alone. Whatever you're doing, just stop. There was a flicker in his eyes, an unsettling glint of something predatory. Oh, but Sarah, they're the key. The comet's light reveals what has always been here. The town has thrived on silence truths, and now, it demands to reclaim its due. A shrill voice sliced through Sarah's panicked thoughts. Mom! Jake's call echoed from the house, pulling her away from Mr. Henderson's menacing presence. I'm coming! She shouted, glancing at Jake, who stood in the doorway, wide-eyed with fear. She broke her gaze from the old man and sprinted to her son, her instincts ordering her to protect him at all costs. Jake's little face was pale as he clutched Mia's tiny hand. Someone was in the yard, Mom. It didn't he look like Mr. Henderson? It wasn't he him. A bone-chilling breeze swept through the opening of their front door, rustling the leaves and tugging at her hair. What did it look like? She demanded, panic threatening to tear through her voice. It was fuzzy, Jake said, his wide eyes darting around outside as if expecting something to leap at them from the shadows. Sarah quickly ushered them back into the house, slamming the door shut behind them. Outside, the neighborhood felt alive and wrong, as if the very trees were leaning in, straining to eavesdrop. The green glow pulsed through the curtains, filling their home with an eerie, sickly hue. Her heart raced. Stay close to me, she whispered, pulling them tighter against her. What had she let into their lives? As she turned to the window, something flickered in the dark, a glimmer just outside their yard. The figure was back, cloaked in shadows that flickered and shifted like the nightmare slowly taking shape. It seemed to reach toward her, long arms stretching and pulling back in a twisted dance. Suddenly, Jake gasped, Look, Mom! The lights above dimmed. No, not just dimmed. They flickered and went out, plunging Maplewood into a silence so deep it rattled her bones. The shadows grew thicker, a suffocating blanket wrapping around everything. The only sound was the pulse of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Who's there? Sarah called, voice shaking, but was met with an engulfing silence. Just as dread closed in, a deep, raspy laugh echoed from beyond the walls as the darkness outside stirred. Come out wherever you are, the voice taunted, inches away and yet just beyond the reach of sight. Terror washed over her, sinking into her gut. This wasn't just a nightmare, it was a reality, a grotesque play unfolding in front of her. Sarah trembled, trying to hold tightly to her children, but the shadows pooled like liquid terror beneath the door, reaching to claim. What was coming for them? And why was the town so quiet, as if it awaited the chaos that was about to ensue? A chilling thought pulsed in her mind. What if the answers lay outside, hidden like secrets in the dark? Can she bear to uncover them? The dark chuckle echoed again, more sinister this time, sending icy fingers gripping Sarah's spine. They know you're inside, the voice hissed, wrapping around her like a noose. They can sense your fear. Jake clutched his mother's leg tightly, and Mia buried her head into Sarah's side. They were all trembling, and in that moment, Sarah could feel the warmth of their small bodies, a fragile comfort against the encroaching horror. Mom, what do we do? Jake whispered, his voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. Shh, she urged, pressing a finger to her lips. She didn't have the faintest idea what to do. The shadows felt alive, writhing beneath the door, pulsing with a life of their own. It was as if the very house was holding its breath, anticipating the horror outside. The laughter returned, growing louder, more twisted. Come outside! Join the dance. It was melodic yet jarring, a dark lullaby meant to lure them out of safety. In a desperate search for a diversion, Sarah grabbed her phone from the table. The screen flashed, lighting the room just enough for her to see shadows inching across the floor. They crept closer, eager to claim what was theirs. She flicked through the contacts with trembling fingers, considering calling anyone. But who would even come? The entire neighborhood had gone dark. The only light now was that sinister green radiance from the comet. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from the back of the house, rattling the windows. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. "Stay here," she said, jaw clenched. With cautious movements, she edged toward the back door, each step feeling like she was inching toward her own doom. "And Mom?" Mia's voice cracked as she tugged on Sarah's dress. "Don't go, I have to see what it is. I promise I'll be quick." She forced a smile, but her heart raced, drowning in dread. The back door creaked as Sarah slowly turned the knob, the sound unbearable in the stifling silence. With one deep breath, she swung the door open, revealing the inky blackness of the backyard, displaced only by the sickly light of the comet filtering through the trees. "Everything's okay," she whispered, stepping outside. The air felt thick, as if saturated with electric tension. She strained to listen, willing the deep creaking of the old wood beneath her feet to mask the tremors of her fear. Something was out there, she could feel it clawing at the edges of her mind, beckoning her deeper. Then, she saw it. A shadow darted between two trees at the far edge of the yard, moving too quickly, too smoothly to be anything human. A jumbled mass of dark and gray, its form wobbling, fuzzy like a bad signal on an old TV. "Mom!" Jake's voice shot through the tension, a sharp reminder of her responsibilities. She needed to protect her kids, not venture deeper into the darkness. But something compelled her to move forward, an instinct she couldn't shake. "Stay out here!" she shouted, a fierce determination creeping into her voice. She was afraid, but she wouldn't show her children that. Whatever it was out there, whatever the town kept hidden, she would face it alone. "Find something to defend yourselves with." As she advanced, the shadow lunged, a blur that moved faster than she could react. In one heartbeat, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness, leaving behind a cacophony of rustling leaves and an unsettling silence. "Mom, please don't go!" Jake's voice seeped through the fear, but it reached her too late. Then, without warning, the air erupted with a bone-chilling screech, a terrifying sound that froze Sarah in place. The shadows slithered around her, desperate and ravenous. "Now you see," the voice returned, echoing from every direction. "You're never alone." It skittered toward her, the ground trembling beneath its weight. She turned to run back to her children, but the shadows twisted, pulling her down, laughing with a cacophony of despair. Would she be able to reach them in time? As darkness overwhelmed her, all she could think was how riddled with secrets everything had become. What had she truly uncovered? The comet surged overhead, its light illuminating a path to madness. And just as the claws of darkness closed around her, a blinding flash erupted, flooding her vision, before everything disappeared into nothingness. What awaited her on the other side, and would any of them still be safe? The world snapped back into focus, but it was not the familiar warmth of home that greeted Sarah. Instead, she found herself lying on cold, damp ground. Confusion swirled in her mind like a storm as she blinked against the harsh brightness of the comet's sickly green light, now casting an eerie glow across an alternate landscape. Dark, twisted trees leaned over, their branches clawing at the air like skeletal fingers. "Mom!" Mia's voice pierced through the haze. Sarah shot up, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mia!" she gasped, looking around frantically. The ground felt alive beneath her, vibrating with a pulse that mirrored her panic. The shadows hovered close, waiting, watching. "Mia!" she called out again, her voice trembling as she stumbled through the underbrush. It felt wrong, everything felt wrong. The foliage rustled unnaturally as if whispering secrets she was not meant to hear. A breathless cry came from the left. Sarah spun, ready to run, but there was nothing there, only the gnarled ruins of a dilapidated house peeking through the trees, a mirror image of her own home, yet warped, as if rendered by a fevered imagination. The windows gaped like empty eye sockets, and just as she saw it, the house shuddered, sending a throat-curdling groan echoing through the air. Backing away, Sarah's foot caught on an exposed root, sending her sprawling onto the forest floor. Dust and leaves mingled with dirt on her palms, but she'd barely registered the pain when she heard it, a low, guttural growl, rolling through the trees like gathering thunder. "Jake! Mia!" she shouted, panic clawing up her throat. They must be here somewhere. They couldn't be far. Something sinister was hunting them, and if she stayed still, it wouldn't take long before it found her. As she pushed herself back up, the ground shivered beneath her. Just ahead, dark shapes began to emerge from the shadowy depths, twisting and shifting like smoke. The figures were humanoid yet hulking, their forms indistinct, merging into the shadows that bloomed around them. The laughter returned, a cacophony of high-pitched giggles mixed with chilling cackles. "Join us, Sarah! The dance has only begun." "No!" she screamed, shaking her head as she stumbled backward. "Get away from me!" She tore her eyes away from the nightmare that threatened to consume her. "Mom!" Her heart leapt at the sound of Jake's voice, desperate and close. She turned, scanning frantically. There! A flash of movement near the crooked trees, followed by a second sharp call that sent a jolt of hope through her. "Mia!" Sarah ran toward the sound, pounding over the uneven ground, her breaths heavy and ragged. The figures were coming closer, now taking on an almost tangible shape. She could see their eyes, dark pools of hunger that glimmered with malice, seething with a desire to drag her into their malevolence. Another scream shuddered through the air, this one filled with a chilling fear that fell like ice on her heart. "No! Don't!" It was Mia, it had to be. "Hold on!" Sarah yelled, pushing herself faster. But each step felt like wading through mire as shadows wrapped around her ankles, slowing her down, teasing her with the promise of safety just out of reach. The decaying house loomed ahead, its door ajar, beckoning her like a siren. A part of her screamed not to go closer, but another voice whispered of salvation hidden within its walls, a refuge from the shadows that hunted them. The laughter grew, swelling to a maddening crescendo. The air chilled her lungs, and for a moment, the world tipped on its axis, the ground beneath her feeling like quicksand. What if she reached her children, and it was already too late? Would the shadows feast on them before she could save them? With desperation surging within her, she darted toward the dilapidated house. "Mia! Jake! Don't be afraid! I'm coming!" But before she could reach the threshold, a dark figure lunged from the shadows, its arms outstretched, claws gleaming in the sickly light. "Together forever," it hissed, the voice slithering into her mind like a calculated promise. A bright flash erupted, blinding her as she collided with whatever horror lay ahead. And then darkness swallowed her whole, silence replacing the case. What awaited her in that silence, and would she find her children there, or had they become something else entirely? Sarah gasped, the air tasting stale and sharp in her lungs as she emerged from the void. She lay sprawled on a wooden floor, rough beneath her palms, the scent of mold thick in the air. As her eyes adjusted, she realized she was inside the dilapidated house she had seen from the forest. Breathing heavily, she pushed herself into a sitting position. "Mia? Jake?" she called out, her voice hoarse and echoing eerily in the silence. The darkness inside the room was suffocating, punctuated only by the faint glow of that cursed green light filtering through the cracked windows. "M.O.M." The voice, so familiar, so near, echoed from another room, its urgency shaking her to the core. Without hesitation, Sarah scrambled to her feet, desperate to reach her children. She sprinted through a hallway lined with peeling wallpaper that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, vibrating with a sinister energy. "Hold on! I'm coming!" she screamed, her heart pounding in rhythm with the frantic footsteps she could hear echoing behind her. A door loomed ahead, slightly ajar, its surface marred with dark stains, the kind that seemed to absorb the weak light. The sound of her children grew louder, mixed with other frightened cries she didn't recognize, an agonized choir trapped within the house. She slammed the door open, ready to confront whatever awaited her. The room was empty but for a flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Shadows danced across the walls, grotesque shapes flailing as if trying to escape the room. In the middle stood a long table, littered with items that belonged to her family: Jake's favorite baseball cap, Mia's doll with one eye missing, framed photographs that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of their own. The air grew thick, heavier, and panic gripped her. Where were they? Just beyond this door, the whisper slithered around her, familiar yet twisted. It didn't come from any living thing but seeped from the very walls, suffocating her in its promise. Sarah turned toward another door, her instinct screaming at her to run. Mia! Jake! She hollered again, pushing through the heavy wood. An icy wind slammed into her, chilling her to the bone. The next room looked like it belonged in a nightmare, furniture overturned, shards of glass glinting like teeth scattered on the floor, shadows curling in the corners. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to see the dark figures from the forest, their forms more defined now, shapes formed of pure shadow and malice. Their mouths curved into wicked grins, eyes like burning coals fixated on her. "Join us, Sarah!" they chanted, their voices a blend of delight and desperation, pulsing like a sinister heartbeat. "You'll never be alone again! Get away from me!" she screamed, backing up against the wall. The laughter rose, a shrill sound that clawed at the very air around her. A solid form stepped forward, an old woman, dressed in ragged clothing that hung off her like weeds. Her eyes were sunken, glassy, and devoid of sanity. "They want you, you can't escape," she rasped, her voice cracking through the laughter, sending a wave of dread crashing over Sarah. The shadows lurked behind the woman, ready to pounce. "No!" Sarah lunged past the woman, shoving her aside as she bolted for the other door at the back of the room. But as she grabbed the handle, it crumbled to dust beneath her grip, another layer of their twisted game. "Mom! Help!" Mia's cry echoed, now coming from below her. Sarah looked down, fear pooling in her stomach like ice. The floor beneath her began to splinter, groaning as if something deep within the shadows was waking, stretching out an unseen hand. Shadows clawed at her ankles, the darkness beckoning her, convincing her she could surrender to it. With her breath caught tight in her chest, she yanked open the trapdoor, leaping down into the abyss, desperation fueling her every movement. As her feet hit the ground, an icy grip wrapped around her wrist. She turned, heart racing, to find a figure emerging from the dark. Together forever, it was Mia's face, twisted with a grin that was no longer innocent. What had she become? A horrifying whisper filled her thoughts as the darkness closed in again, dragging her deeper into shadows that promised no escape. And then everything went black again, the silence deafening and mocking her every thought. Could she ever reach her children again, or had the shadows already claimed them all? Sarah felt the weight of darkness press down on her, squeezing the last breath from her lungs as she grappled with the horror that engulfed her. The laughter of shadows echoed in her mind, pulling her deeper into their vortex. "Mia! Jake!" she called again, the desperation twisting her voice into a strangled plea. The landscape around her shifted. The trapdoor had vanished, and she stood on a surface that felt like cold, wet clay, oozing around her feet. It pulled her in, dragging her down, just as the darkness around her throbbed with energy. Shadows twisted and writhed, faces emerging only to be swallowed again, each one more tormented than the last. Their cries melded into a cacophony, striking her like 1,000 tiny knives. "Leave me alone!" she shouted. But her resolve crumbled under the pressure. The memories of her family surged back, images of laughter, of bedtime stories, and of Mia's bright, innocent smile. But now, they seemed tainted, the laughter morphing into the shrieks of the shadows, distorting everything she held dear into something grotesque and warped. And then a flicker of that green light emerged again, swirling above her, illuminating the faces trapped in torment for just a moment. She focused, heart racing, wondering if the light had the answers she sought. "Please!" she whispered, almost to herself, reaching out toward the glow. "Show me!" As if in response, the light pulsated, and for a split second, the darkness hesitated. Shadows recoiled, as if the light was a flame that frightened them. She took a step forward, encouraged maybe it was her way out, the key to freeing her children. But then came a more sinister whisper, slicing through her thoughts like a blade. "You don't want the truth." She froze. The shadows crept closer, and the laughter returned, a sinister echo embracing her, wrapping tighter around her chest. Just give in, they coaxed, pulling her deeper into the muck. No! She cried, pulling her hand back, desperation fueling her will to fight against their cold touch. I want to lose myself. She staggered backwards, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. But the ground beneath her shifted. From the muck, a hand shot upward, skeletal and claw-like, lurching towards her. With a primal scream, she swung her foot down, crushing the ghastly hand before it could lurch for her again. The impact sent tremors through the ground, and suddenly, the entire room convulsed. Walls wavered, warping and pulsating. Her surroundings began to crack like glass under extreme pressure. "M.O.M. Please!" The despairing scream of her daughter shattered through the chaos, pushing her forward. Sarah bolted in the direction of the voice, ignoring the shadows clawing at her ankles. The walls shimmered, morphing briefly to fleeting images of her and her children, fragile moments of happy times together, each one spiraling away into darkness like dust in the wind. No! Suddenly, the oppressive darkness surged forward, swallowing those cherished memories, leaving nothing but fear and emptiness in their wake. Everything around her began to splinter even more, as if the very fabric of the house was tearing apart. The shadows recoiled, forming a massive silhouette, a monstrous figure. Its presence filled the space with a sense of dread, and Sarah realized it was not just a manifestation of her worst nightmares, but something far more powerful, something that thrived on her pain. "Join us," it echoed. "Reunite." Just as she prepared to scream, the ground lurched beneath her again, tipping at a harsh angle. She felt herself slipping, the heaviness of despair pulling her towards the abyss below. Her children's voices echoed, entwined with the darkness. A terrifying thought flashed through her mind: what if she had to sacrifice everything to save them? With sheer willpower, she gathered her strength, holding tight to the image of Mia and Jake, fueling her resolve. She screamed into the chaos, "I'll never give up!" And in that moment, the darkness hesitated. But before she could make sense of it, the voices of her children surged. Filled with fear and determination, strong enough to cut through the suffocating dread. "Mom! We're here!" The shadows seemed to writhe in confusion, and as they did, she saw a faint shimmer in the air, an opening that whispered promises of escape. Summoning her strength, Sarah launched herself forward, racing toward the light. The grotesque figure inched closer, clawing, grasping. She could almost feel its icy breath hot on her neck. Would it be enough to reach the light? Would it lead her to her children, or into an even deeper darkness? As Sarah surged toward the tremulous light, the grotesque figure let out a rumbling growl that reverberated through her bones. The very space around her seemed to crumble, and with every step forward, the pull of the shadows tugged desperately at her legs, trying to drag her back into their suffocating grip. "Mom!" The voice cried again, clearer now, spurring her forward. She could almost sense her children's presence, warm and inviting, like the embrace of sunlight breaking through the darkest clouds. Just as hope ignited within her, the monstrous silhouette lunged, its clawed fingers swiping through the air with sickening speed. She barely managed to duck, rolling sideways into the blinding light just as the shadows roared in fury behind her. The surge of warmth enveloped her, and she grabbed at the light, clutching it tightly. It felt solid, almost tangible. In that moment, she saw faces again: Mia, Jake. Their eyes wide with fear yet shining with an iridescent glow. "Stay with me," Sarah urged, pulling them into the shimmering embrace of light. But the darkness shrieked, a thousand voices screaming in torment, as though the sound itself could tear her apart. The ground below them trembled violently, shifting and boiling, disintegrating into a thick fog of black and gray. They were all losing ground, the dimensional walls of this surreal nightmare collapsing. "Mom! Don't let go!" Mia pleaded, her little voice quivering with fear. With all her strength, Sarah latched onto her children, holding their tiny hands tightly in her own. "I want tea! I promise!" But as she looked into the shimmering depths of light, fear clawed at her again. What if it was a trap? What if it led them into something worse? But desperation ruled her heart. She could not lose them, not now. Not ever. Face your fears, Sarah. You must confront it. The voice echoed clearer now, guiding her as if it were the very essence of the light. The weight of its meaning rested heavily on her shoulders, pressing down even as it encouraged. I can do this. I have to do this, she whispered, heart racing. Just as she steeled her resolve, a harrowing breach crackled through the air. The dark figure, rising higher than before, engulfing her children in a vortex of despair. Time froze. Panic surged through Sarah as she felt the light flicker beside her. It was failing, dimming against the onslaught of soulless shadow. Mom! It's coming! Jake shouted, terror lining his voice. We won't lose each other! Sarah screamed, determination flooding her veins. In this final moment, she shifted her gaze to the dark figure. It's you and me, she challenged, her voice a battle cry. You want my fear? Take it! With her words, she drew memories of her pain, her worry, the layers of grief she had carried. She let it all flood the space between her and the monster. The shadows wavered, recoiling, as if they were alive, breathing at her defiance. Let my kids go! She roared, rage igniting from the ashes of her sorrow. The scream of the figure shifted, becoming shrill and shrieking, ricocheting off the walls of the abyss. It swelled, morphing, becoming unstable. She could feel the ground shifting yet again. Her time was slipping, she had to act now. Heart pounding, she rushed forward, thrusting the light toward the figure. It seemed to hesitate, faltering, a moment of pure vulnerability. The darkness wavered, splitting, she could almost see through to what was beyond. Mom, hurry! Mia's voice snapped her back, a tether to the chaos. In that moment of clarity, she lunged, reaching desperately for the flickering glow that reflected in her children's terrified eyes. What lay beyond? Freedom from the grip of darkness? A way back to life? Or something worse, waiting to consume them all? As she rushed forward, the shadows seemed to split, a torn fabric of night sealing behind her, and in that sudden shift, the world around them plunged into chaos once more. What have I done? Sarah thought, her heart racing, as she felt the pull of yet another unknown. Suddenly, a crack echoed through the darkness, and she spun around, faced with a swirling black mist that writhed and pulsed with energy. It was closing in, and the light wavered dangerously. Would hope still live within them, or would despair consume them all? As Sarah grappled with the uncertainty, she caught a final glimpse of something in the swirling mass, a familiar face clawing its way to the surface, eyes wide, hauntingly familiar. That haunting visage sent ice through her veins. What if this was someone who had come before? Would they truly escape, or would they join the throngs of trapped souls? As hope flickered, so too did her ties to reality, and the abyss writhed in anticipation of their next move. The black mist swirled around them, vaporous tendrils reaching out like greedy fingers, slipping through spaces that should remain untouched. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, fear wrapping around her like a vice. The familiar face in the mist flickered, seemed to smile then grimace, sending tremors of dread throughout her body. Mama! Mia's voice quaked, pulling Sarah from her horrified reverie. That cry was a lifeline, pulling her back from the brink of despair. She was still here, the light still flickering, though it fought against an overwhelming tide. Let us go! Sarah grasped her children's hands tighter, nudging them toward the flickering warmth. But the mist pulsed with a life of its own, darting toward them with sinister intent. Shadows snarled around them, a cacophony of hissing whispers filling the air. They echoed her insecurities, her failures, twisting her internal wounds into something tangible. You'll never escape, they taunted, each voice laced with malice. This is where you belong, no! Sarah shouted, raising her free hand, willing the light to grow brighter. She concentrated, pouring everything into her will. The weight of her grief, her fear, transformed into determination as she focused on her children. They were worth every ounce of fight. The darkness shrieked, fangs of black vapor snapping close, but the light surged, pushing them back. A brilliant flare erupted from the void where the two forces clashed. Sarah felt warmth spreading in her chest, pushing the suffocating dread away, if only for a moment. Mom! The face! Jake shouted, his grip tightening, eyes wide and terrified. The mist shuffled, revealing the distorted features of the familiar face once more. It twisted and melted, forming a visage Sarah thought she would never forget. It was her mother, long gone and trapped between worlds. Oh God, Sarah barely breathed. No, it can't be. She fought against the pull of nostalgia, pushing memories of warmth and love aside as terror gripped her throat. Let her go, let her go. Mia sobbed, echoing the very fear that curled in Sarah's stomach. The figure was not ready to fade, nor did it wear the comforting guise of family anymore. The memories twisted, darkened. Was this truly her mother, or something dressed in a veil of deceit? Each second felt like an eternity as the black mist receded, but the flickering light wavered dangerously. Face what you fear the most, the guiding voice rippled through her, insistent. Driven by instinct, Sarah took a breath, pushing aside her doubt. You are not real, she yelled at the figure. You don't own me. You don't have any power here. The shape shuddered, and the darkness bristled with emotions that surged and evolved into a tempest. The hellish voices crescendoed, screaming in unison, their agony morphing into fury. Shadows coiled, gathering strength, and began to rear like monstrous beasts prepared to strike. Mama, the figure called softly, as if trying to reel her back into trust. No! Sarah screamed. You can't have what you want. You'll never have me. As she hurled the light forward with renewed force, everything shattered into countless shards. The swirling mass of darkness distorted and expanded, revealing faint outlines of past lives, hallways lit by soft, warm bulbs, moments laughing over family dinners, darkness creeping in unseen corners. The figure recoiled, twisting and twisting in agony, and then let out a bone-chilling howl as the shadows surged forward, enveloping Sarah and her children once more. Could they truly escape? Or were they doomed to be trapped in a cycle of darkness forever? In the center of the maelstrom, Sarah clung to her children, heart racing, breath hitching in her throat. What lay ahead? What had she awakened? As the world collapsed around them, the darkness began to pulsate rhythmically, revealing a haunting truth buried deep within its core, a truth that wove the essence of fear into something greater, something incomprehensible. What awaited them on the other side? Would it offer salvation or a fate far worse? The shadows lunged forward, eager to claim their terrified prey. Sarah felt the icy fingers of fear clutch at her throat, but she would not let go. With every ounce of her strength, she pushed away the past memories, the longing for safety and normalcy. Instead, all that filled her mind was the raw, unyielding love for her children, the will to protect them at all costs. Mia! Hold my hand tight! She cried, the urgency in her voice echoing through the gathering darkness. Jake had tightened his hold, their small hands gripping hers like lifelines, anchors in the storm. The light pulsed violently as the figure of her mother contorted amidst the chaos, her lips curling into a sinister smile, teeth gleaming like knives crafted from despair. Sarah, my sweet girl, you know I'm here for you. Don't you want to join me? The voice slithered through the fog, seducing and sickening all at once. Shut up! Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. You're not my mother! You're nothing but an illusion! The darkness responded with a low growl, feeling her resistance like a challenge. The mist rippled, revealing shadowy forms of torment, faces that twisted in agony, and whispers laced with vile accusations as if it wanted to unearth every guilt-ridden secret buried in her mind. You wish you could have saved us, they hissed, filling her ears with the sharp ache of regret. No! She took a step forward, her heart racing. The light flickered again, bringing a moment's clarity in the storm of chaos. This isn't real. My family is gone, and the past will not haunt me. The figure screamed, limbs thrashing as Sarah's declaration pierced through its guise. Shadows recoiled, the darkness retreating for mere seconds, almost as if it couldn't bear her fierce resolve. But then, it charged forward manifold, a horde of despair crashing like waves against the shore. As they pressed in, the light from Sarah's heart stretched thin, desperate to push back the tide. Each pulse felt like a lifeline, a fragile hope in the face of overwhelming despair. But the malevolent force was relentless, surging and surging until Sarah felt herself being pulled, her feet sliding backward on the slick, shifting earth. "Mama! Don't let go!" Mia sobbed, tears streaking her cheeks, fear etched into her tiny features. "I want tea! I swear!" Sarah's voice trembled, and panic threatened to consume her. She forced her body to move, to hurl herself forward, fighting with every fiber of her being. "Together! We fight together!" They screamed as one unified force, their voices mingling amid the chaos, a declaration of defiance. And for just a moment, the darkness faltered, hesitating as if uncertain. Then, like a sudden crack in ice, the ground beneath them trembled. The mist shuddered, a howl rising from the core of the darkness, a desperate wail of something ancient and evil. The cacophony of whispers intensified, swarming like a violent wind. A series of grotesque figures materialized from the mist, twisted versions of people she had known, all contorted in agony. "Face us! Revel in your sins!" They roared, voices layered with malice as they lunged toward Sarah, grasping hands that seemed to stretch infinitely. She closed her eyes for just a moment, summoning the love for her children. She could end this nightmare. They could emerge, running toward the light. "Now! Run!" she shouted, ripping her eyes open, mustering every will she had left. They bolted into the horrifying abyss, the specters in pursuit, the shadows thrumming with eager anticipation. Heart in her throat, she led her children through the darkness, the pulse of the mist pressing in like claws seeking flesh. But what lay at the end of this dark corridor? An exit or an even greater trap waited in the shadows. Could they find their way back to the light, or were they destined to be swallowed whole by the grotesque creatures of their past? The path ahead was obscured by swirling black fog, twisted paths beckoning like sirens of doom. In the distance, a flicker glimmered, a fragmented shard of hope, but at what cost? As they neared it, a new terror emerged from the depths, challenging all they had fought for. What was rising behind them? And why was it laughing? The laughter echoed, a malevolent sound blending with the howls of despair. Sarah skidded to a halt, dragging her children to her side, the palpable darkness pressing in. The shadowy figures began to materialize again, but this time, they surged forward, a tidal wave of rage and fear. "Don't look back!" Sarah yelled, pushing her children ahead of her, as she steeled herself for what lay behind. She felt the electrifying pulse of love and protection igniting within her, fueling every frantic thought. "Stay together! We can make it!" They charged into the fog, and the sickly green light of the comet began to pulse in the distance, flickering like a beacon. It pierced through the swirling chaos, an invitation, a promise, a way home. But as they ran, shadowy tendrils grasped, snatching at their ankles, seeking to drag them down into a bitter embrace. "Mom!" Jake cried, stumbling, and for a split second time froze. Panic gripped Sarah's heart like a vice. She glanced back. The twisted forms were almost upon them, their faces exaggerated masks of her greatest fears. The pitiful wails morphed into her own echoes of sorrow, a sound she recognized all too well. "No!" Sarah shouted, clenching her fists. They were wanting her to falter. They wanted her to regret. But regret had no place here. She turned her head forward, focusing on the growing light. "Keep running! Just a bit more!" Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of despair. They were tears of fierce determination, of love that could pierce through even the greatest darkness. "M.O.M." Mia's voice cracked, slipping into fear that threatened to unravel them. Hearing that made Sarah's heart race even more. "I'm here!" she shouted, spinning around briefly to see her daughter's frantic face. "Hold my hand tight." As they surged onward, the light grew stronger, illuminating their path as shadows shrieked, recoiling momentarily as it surged to life. "Let go!" the voices screamed, clawing at every thread of doubt. But their cries lacked the sting. Sarah felt the warmth of her children's hands, the shared heartbeat of their hopes driving her forward. Together, they could fight against any torment. They pushed through the thick walls of darkness, light shining brighter with each stride, propelling them toward freedom. Just as they were about to reach the shimmering threshold, lethal shadows coiled, darting from every angle, grasping for their souls. "No!" Sarah screamed, her body instinctively guarding the children as the darkness surged. A dark claw grazed her back, and pain flared. But she pushed through, fueled by sheer will. "Mom!" Jake wailed, but she felt it. The shadows weren't here for him, nor Mia. They were hungry for her pain. Adrenaline surging, she turned back toward the shadows, eyes blazing. "You have no power here! I reject you!" The moment hung like a heartbeat in time. Shadows recoiled momentarily as her fierce declaration reverberated through the air, resonating with the power of love and loss. Her truth. "Now!" she yelled, leading her children toward the crescendo of light in the distance, feeling the air shimmer around them. And then they broke into the blinding glow. Light enveloped them, a warm embrace of pure comfort washing over. Sarah shielded her eyes for a moment, basking in the victorious warmth that radiated from the core of the comet. The shadows hissed, fading, retreating into corners like fierce beasts driven away by the dawn. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The air was bright, vibrant. They stood on her front porch. Home. The familiar creaking of the doorway soothed her soul, and she fell to her knees, clutching Mia and Jake tightly. "Is it over?" Jake whispered, voice shaky, but she could feel hope threading through the cracks of their terror. "I think so," Sarah whispered back, wrapped in warmth as she held them to her chest, relief flooding her. "We're safe now." But a growing warmth felt familiar lingered in the air, like a blanket of protection easing their fear. The comet still loomed above, now merely a brilliant beacon in the sky, a reminder of the night that had sought to consume them but failed. "Let us go inside," she said, rising slowly, holding each child's hand as they entered their home. The world felt renewed, still haunting yet hopeful. She would protect them, she would guard them from the shadows both outside and within. As she settled them into bed, she looked out the window, the comet glowing softly against the night sky. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," she promised, a whisper that resonated in the stillness of a neighborhood no longer haunted. And with that promise, she closed her eyes, ready to embrace the light streaming from the comet, hoping the nightmares stayed sealed in that darkened realm, forever out of reach. Sarah felt a weight lift, yet knew the shadows would always linger in stories and whispered memories. But they had emerged victorious this time. With her children safe, she would confront whatever lay beyond, ready to dance in the light, hand in hand with the ones she loved. So, let this be a warning. Secrets can shift in darkness, but light could strike back, fierce and unwavering. If you don't want to miss stories like this in the future, you need to subscribe now. Smash that like button to show your support and feed the algorithm. Every click helps us to keep bringing you these stories. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. What do you think happened in Maplewood? And share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Your support means everything.